Hey guys, welcome in to a Cover 3 college football mailbag. We got a lot of these questions in our Apple Podcast reviews, some on YouTube, and with our full kind of planned out schedule, we have not been able to do as many mailbags as we wanted, and I was going through them trying to organize them into some themes, and I got one from Allie, and I said, man, it's early in the morning. I bet you my friend Bill Connelly is up, and I'm bringing on Bill Connelly from ESPN, inventor of the SP Plus system, like the best ranking system in college football by far. And Bill, her question is literally about a stat that you invented. So I had.
I think I stole this from a coach. That's where most of my good ideas come from. Is just coaches say it, and then they don't have a platform to write about it. So then I take the idea and call it my own. It's great.
So the stat we're talking about today is Havoc Rate. Allie writes, hey, I want to know about defending high-octane offenses. I love the pod. What is y'all's opinion on these defenses that seem to be moving towards sacrificing quote-unquote havoc and down-to-down yards and just not get torched on explosive plays? I see Barry Odom playing a 3-3-6 at Arkansas. That's like a defensive alignment for those y'all who may not know at home. Although 3-3-6 is
that's
technically illegal. Yeah. If Barry Odom can get away with playing a 3-3-6, then I would expect their defense to be much better than it is because that'd be 12 players. Others like Kentucky and even Georgia seem to give up a little bit to prevent a lot. Do you think this is A, a viable plan to win games? And if it is, B, essential for some teams' defenses to put them in a position to win games? So I guess we should start. Bill, how do you define Havoc Rate?
So Havoc Rate is basically your total tackles for loss, which includes sacks, obviously, passes defensed, which is, interceptions and breakups, and forced fumbles divided by total plays. So it's pretty simple to calculate. It makes a lot of sense. And it's a good, just pure measure of disruption. Disruption isn't the only way to play good defense. It's a philosophical thing as much as anything, but there is a decent correlation between that disruption and then your overall efficiency numbers, because obviously if you're making a tackle for loss, not only is that an unsuccessful play for the offense, but you're probably setting up another unsuccessful play because you're talking about a 2nd and 12 or now 3rd and 10 or whatever the situation is. So there is a correlation, but I think you have to have the playmakers to do it. I mean, that's always a big factor. So the question isn't necessarily, is it a viable path? It absolutely is. Barry Odom's entire career has been based around trying to rush only 4 guys and play everything else safe and tackle well and wait for mistakes. And it works in college football because 18 to 22-year-olds make mistakes. But if you want to do that and win a national title, I'm not as sure, because basically, if you've got the athletes to win the national title, I think you probably need to put them in disruptive positions. So if you're a welterweight team or a light heavyweight, it makes a lot of sense. But if you're a heavyweight, I think you need to be pushing teams backwards and disrupting as much as possible.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And really it's a risk reward proposition, right? So every defensive coordinator in America wants to have havoc. Nobody's like, no, thank you. Tackles for loss and forced fumbles. No. But how much risk are you willing to sacrifice in order to get that reward? And that comes down to the type of player that you have. I remember on the old Barton and Bud podcast, shout out Barton, who's now the GM at Vanderbilt, we basically just started calling Arkansas's defense like the most humble defense in America. Like, they knew they didn't have the dudes, and they just said, okay, you're not going to kill us with explosive plays, and we will try to win. I guess this is a term I coined, but I'm sure somebody else has thought of this. Red zone roulette. Right. When you get down in the red zone, you're not going to give up explosive plays anyway. You're in more of a compressed area. If you have guys who can't run, not that it doesn't matter, it just matters a little bit less than it matters in the open field, where you really need guys who can run and get after it. I think the examples that Allie cited are good ones. I went and looked them up. Arkansas 102nd in Havoc Rate, 67 or 62nd in SP Plus defense. Washington, interestingly, with Jimmy Lake up there, they played 4 games, so sample set alert. 40th and 19th. Kentucky 116th and 41st, which is a massive gap. But Mark Stoops has, for a long time played a very heavy zone defense. They don't give up a lot of explosive plays typically, and they play good red zone defense. And then Georgia, interestingly, 27th in Havoc, which is still very good, I should point out. And first overall in SP Plus defense. Just they always tackle so well.
Right.
And don't allow yards after the catch basically ever.
Right. Well, Georgia and Alabama 6, 8, 10 years ago was kind of the same thing where, I mean, their sack rates weren't very good. They weren't necessarily making a lot of, tackles for loss. It was just that, anything you tried was only going to gain 3 yards and they would eventually get off the field. But I think over time, Saban recognized it, and now Smart at Georgia has recognized it too. Just, it still helps to have that, to be able to disrupt things a little bit better, especially in pass rush situations. I think one example that's really interesting is Northwestern. I mean, they pretty much patented the don't give up big plays, work the ball down into the red zone, and then unleash, your specialty package and force field goals or turnovers or whatever. Mike Hankwitz, it was just, the one time I got to talk to him, it was just on and on about how the red zone is where the creativity is and where some of your most interesting tactics are. But then last year, Northwestern, Hankwitz's last year, probably their best defense they've ever had, in part because they could also disrupt. Looking up their numbers, they were, where did it go?
Eighth in overall Havoc Rate, Bill.
Yeah, right. That's exactly.
Crazy.
Because they actually had some guys, Ernest Brown, Blake Gallagher, guys who could, invade the backfield a little bit more. And that created kind of a perfect storm. They still had the good red zone defense. They still, they had a crazy good red zone defense, actually, not the numbers. They still did all the things Northwestern does, except they could also force 2nd and 12. And I mean, they finished 3rd in defensive SP plus. So yeah, I think that's a good example, just because they've always been good at defensively. But once you add if you can get a couple of playmakers and put them in space that they need, then that's kind of the best case scenario.
I wonder if more teams won't attempt to adopt this approach, as we've seen the sport become,
right,
kind of drastically more explosive, especially through the air.
Yeah,
over the last. Maybe did Oklahoma start this when Lincoln Riley figured out how to bust all these coverages? I'm trying to think, when everybody just started to play pitch and catch on the deep ball.
Right. Ole Miss was pretty good at that at the peak of the Hugh Freeze era too, I believe. But yeah, Oklahoma is as responsible for it as anybody, you think.
You almost wonder, with the sport becoming more explosive, is a greater value going to be placed on finding ways to not allow explosive plays? And then it's sort of like what Nick Saban said in that video. He's like, guys, allowing 27 points, that ain't a bad thing anymore.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the way that the sport is.
Yeah. I think we're seeing a slight trend towards, man coverage as much as possible, because it does take, some of the conflict out of, RPOs and whatnot, if you can play good man coverage. There are only so many guys who can play man coverage, though. And if you don't have them, your only other option really is either to play man coverage and get burned, like Missouri did last year, actually, either play softer, make sure you're not getting burned over the top, and just make tackles and hopefully they eventually make a mistake before they get to the end zone.
I think there are some teams that are actually sort of it's interesting to look at the inverse of this, right? Where teams that were really, really good at Havoc, but maybe it didn't translate, and it's almost like, are they selling out too much? So Washington State is an interesting one. Again, very small sample set in the Pac-12 last year, but their defense ranked 108th in SP Plus defense.
Yeah.
And they were 17th in overall Havoc Rate, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, you saw that with Pitt. It seems like Narduzzi might have the pieces he needs now, or he did last year. He's got some turnover in the secondary now to worry about, but he was basically trying to play Michigan State defense at Pitt and didn't have the guys to do it. And Michigan, at the peak of the D'Antonio Narduzzi defensive era, they really were top 5 in success rate allowed, but then bottom 5 in explosiveness, just because whatever successful plays they gave up were bombs. They just didn't give up any. Pitt's, the ratio there kind of switched, and they were only top 40 or 50 in success rate, and something they were just getting burned all the time. But I think now he did last year at least seem to have the pieces he needed finally, and their defense kind of skyrocketed. So curious what happens without, whoever, Paris Ford and whatnot. But that's kind of, you see the risk reward pretty clearly with Narduzzi, especially, I think.
I think that's, we had chatted about that on G Chat for a while. It's like, Pitt is really trying to play a certain type of defense here that they
just couldn't.
In 8, definitely 17, 18, 19, trying to think when Narduzzi first got there. Yeah, they didn't have the dudes to run with people, and they, Bill,
and it's it's kind of an identity crisis for you at that point. If your entire career and your success was based on this, and then suddenly you can't do it, you better be able to adapt.
No doubt about it. Bill, really appreciate you jumping on. The inventor of Havoc Rate, y'all, or at least inventor of coining the term.
That's right.
Check out Bill, ESPN Plus.
Yes.
Awesome SP Plus content there all the time. I really enjoyed his recent, did you call it chaos? What do we need to have happen to have chaos again?
Yeah, the chaos roadmap. That's, we're going to try to will another 2007 to happen because we're kind of due, I think.
Please give us something interesting at the end of November.
Yep.
All right, Bill. Have fun, buddy.
All right. Take care.